It looks like we have quite a few folks who can't make it today.
Yeah, not sure who's going to be available.
Right. Oh, well, we'll give them a few minutes, I guess.
Hey, Tara.
Good morning. How is everyone today?
Hello, morning everyone.
Good morning.
Hi there.
Hey Terry, Jan, Nicola, Tara.
Looks like we may need to send emergency caffeine to Tara.
Yeah.
Phew.
Yeah, sorry. I had a fun weekend, but very busy, and I splurged. My family bought a used RV.
Wow.
Yeah, and then because we bought the used RV, we had to take it out for a test trip, which really was just going and getting some takeout and then finding a pretty place to park while we ate it. That was so I now have a 20-something foot monstrosity parked in front of my house.
Oh my God.
Like we've this whole pandemic isolation thing. It's been hard.
Yeah.
My youngest is still not vaccinatable, so.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the good news that I've just seen is the Pfizer has been approved for 5 to 11-year-olds.
Wait, what?
Pfizer
Yeah,
is-
that news is just out today.
Great.
I did not see that. All right.
So hoping by end of October they can be rolling out lower dosed vaccine.
Wow. Okay. Oh, there it is.
Good thing you got your RV just in time.
Yeah. Well, both my wife and my older daughter had pretty bad reactions to the vaccine. So we have to wait for the pediatrician to approve it for the younger daughter. A lot of autoimmune in the family.
Mm.
So, all right, cool. Do we have quorum? Quorum enough?
Yeah, I think so.
All right. Jan, are you presenting?
Yeah,
Okay.
I have not before presented on Zoom, so I'm going to just click this little icon that says share screen and hope for the best. So we'll see what happens. Yeah.
I can also take a stab at it, and you can just say next slide if you want. But
Okay.
Zoom's share screens could be a little weird. Tracy, do you need to like do some kind of permission settings or something?
You should be able.
I think, yeah.
No.
Do you want me? I can do it. And let me see. It's this one.
Yeah. What happened when you tried? Okay, there we go.
That's worked.
Wonderful. Good. Okay, so Nicola and I are going to both speak to these slides. We didn't really have much of a chance to prepare formally, but we got our ideas in a row.
We're all friends here, Jan.
Yeah. So what we were hoping to do today was just kind of make sure that we correctly interpreted the assumptions that we're making about kind of who our readers are. Verify that we are actually thinking about producing the correct deliverables, and then ask a few questions and try to come up with a general sense of what our next steps might be. So, yeah. So, okay, I think we just, yeah. So, yeah, so these are the assumptions. And this is actually, yeah, this is a great thing to really nail down. So what we want the site to do is share best practices and invite content from the community. What we believe visitors come to the site to do is because they want to improve their company or organization, and they want to share their story. So you can see we kind of got a green blue thing here going with what's in it for me, what's in it for the community, sort of thing. And then our deliverables, we are going to try to put together an IA that maps to your content needs. And we're going to try to recommend tooling. Did we also say that we were going to build out a skeleton of the website? Was that part of the plan? I wasn't sure.
Plan is very loose, so.
Okay. So we'll deal with that. when we get-
What does IA stand for?
Oh, information architecture. It's really just kind of how the content flows on the site.
Perfect. Thank you.
And then one of our deliverables is definitely a contributor's guide. We got that for sure. Does anybody have any thoughts on this right now, or should I go on?
Yeah, no, I think this looks good. Looks like you nailed the high level points.
Okay, great. So our proposal is, this is based on the research that we've been doing in our own team and kind of recognizing how best to support people with technical goals. We thought that we would try to put together a goals-based journey for customers and then sort of map the content to that. And this slide here is I just threw some stuff on the screen. This may not have anything to do with what we're actually trying to do, but when we get to next steps, I'm going to propose that we fill this out a little bit more so that we have kind of a high-level starting point to work with. And so the user goals across the top are kind of, pretty standard issue for developing software and implementing it. And then the phases are fairly arbitrary, but also a fairly standard issue. And then the user questions is an attempt to get at what is the user thinking about at any given time during their journey, and how can we make sure that we give them that content when they need it. So you can see, for your site, really there's an awful lot in the learn area. And I think you could even have learn down under share as well, possibly. But so this site is primarily a learning site, which is great. So we'll come back to this slide later. Maybe go on ahead, Nicola. Next one, yeah. So this is sort of how we were envisioning the way people would interact with the site, that they would come and the very first thing they would have to do would be decide if they wanted to go down the kind of improve my organization path, or if they wanted to go down the share my story path. And they're not exclusive, of course, they could bounce back and forth between two of them, but if we organize the content to support them doing one of those two directions to start with, I think they'll be pretty well located. So then I was hoping we could kind of validate the stuff that Nicola and I put down here. Is this really what we're expecting they'll be asking and trying to do? So I'll let you just take a look at it. And I'll see if you think that's relatively valid enough to go on.
Yeah, can I ask about when it says gain name recommendation?
Oh, sorry, recognition, that should be.
Recognition, okay.
And that was kind of just a wild guess. Are there other reasons that people would want to share their story that we didn't get to?
I think in our experience, like when CNCF did a survey for their end user community, amongst the top two were one, just improving the brand of their companies, and related, it was basically around recruiting developers. So I think
Okay,
pretty spot on.
Okay, cool. Let me just get that because it's driving me crazy otherwise. Okay.
So one of the things that strikes me, and this is possibly just because it's shorthand for this presentation, but I think we need to make sure that the focus here is on continuous delivery rather
Okay.
than CI/CD
Okay.
per se.
Okay.
Because that's the, if you like, that's the overarching approach, and then CI/CD is a part of a methodology to deliver on that approach.
Great.
How does everybody else feel about that?
I agree. I'm trying to move folks to talking about continuous delivery, and I almost see CI/CD as a kind of deprecated term.
Oh, okay.
But with
School
the
of
irony,
thought,
of course.
school of thought.
No, I think it is the generally accepted way people identify that sector, but it's known to be pretty problematic. And yeah, I
Okay.
agree with what Terry says.
Okay, that's great.
Which is a separate thing. I think we've had some efforts around the whole glossary topic, and I think as part of this, we should finalize some aspect of that, which is just here's a set of terms, here's what we mean as the CDF when we talk about them within our community. Some can have multiple definitions, but I think we'll do that. We should do that exercise and close the loop on it, just so we have that common reference.
Yeah, great. Very helpful to have a set of terms validated. Let's see, gap analysis. Okay, let's go on to the next page. And Nicola, would you be okay with talking to this? You're on mute. Sorry.
Yeah, and it wouldn't let me unmute while I was presenting. I unmute and then present. So yes, this is all the learning curve of not using Zoom. Okay.
Yeah.
You're doing great. Oh no, and it's muted. Let me see if I can unmute you. Hang on. Can I?
There. Oh, no.
I can. Oh, there we go.
Very weird.
Yeah, I don't know why
Okay.
I'm muted.
Let's try one more time. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Huzzah.
All right. I think I had to deselect share tab audio. Okay. So in the introduction of the best practices draft, there is a bunch of stuff talking about sort of the history of using waterfall approach and moving into a more, having a iterating more quickly and having that feedback loop and getting into some of the DORA key metrics and so on. But then we kind of jump straight into here are all the best practices for version control and so on. So one of the things we saw as kind of a gap is providing this context around where do I start? So yes, we would like to modernize the way that we do things with continuous delivery, but where do I even start? What parts of my current processes do I need to address? So this sort of assessment piece and trying to understand that this is an incremental process and that this isn't just you modernize by implementing Kubernetes. Like it's not that's not how this works. If I quickly jump over to another slide deck. So some of these 4 DORA key metrics, they kind of map to speed and stability, which are things that people are very interested in. This is one of our DREs put this deck together. And so when you look at the DORA capabilities, you don't just go from A to B in one fell swoop, right? And the specific capabilities you want to focus on will depend on your assessment of where you are. So some of that comes from things like value stream mapping. Some of that might come from doing the Dora quick check or whatever, like, or reading through Accelerate and saying, oh, this resonates with me, I have this gap here. But you don't do this in one fell swoop. Everybody has their kind of journey. And so if you want to get to this mythic Team X that has all these wonderful capabilities, your journey there, you're going to have your own path based on where the gaps are in your own process. So, you know, in this deck, it's like, well, you could blow up what you have and like implement everything from scratch, but that's one road that's kind of boiling the ocean. You can keep what you have and then you're not making any progress, or you do things iteratively. And so the idea then is you use something like value stream mapping, or you use the Dora quick check to kind of see where you are in terms of the 4 key metrics. So I think that kind of messaging is missing from what we have on the site, or at least making those kinds of clear connections. So the people say, yeah, I want to do this like CD stuff. How do I start? So this is kind of what this slide is about. Is we talked in our last meeting about how we want to help users make connections across the whole software supply chain, and that we also want to help people understand that you are here. So one of the things we identified in sort of helping to close that gap is talking about how do you assess where you are and what your next steps should be, and then making the changes based on that, rather than trying to buy into the marketing of, oh, you should implement Kubernetes, or oh, you should implement this, and like trying to navigate the buzzwords, right? So some of the tools for that are things like value stream mapping, using Dora. There are some other frameworks that can help with that, like Salsa. But that's what this slide's about. So does that kind of make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's really important. And I definitely feel you're right that there is still a significant gap in the middle of this narrative, where we need to connect people across. And I also think it's important that we're careful about how we put things in context. Because the thing that I keep seeing repeatedly is, you know, where DevOps and continuous delivery are about going faster in the context of implementing, you know, lean product discovery and product commercialization in a Silicon Valley model. Most people who are new to DevOps or to continuous delivery just fixate on the going faster thing, and they believe that they can apply it to anything and it will work equally as effectively because it's just about going faster.
Right.
And of course, that's without the first half of that, the methodology means almost nothing because it doesn't add the value. It's the product commercialization part that's giving you the value, and this is how you do it quicker. So we need to make sure that we're making that connection for people and showing the context as well as the acceleration.
Do you mean
Yeah,
like the
absolutely.
blind adoption of two, sorry to cut across here.
Oh, go ahead.
No, just Terry, just to clarify, so you mean like the blind adoption of tools because this is the new buzz tool, this is the new tool everyone's talking about, we're just going to start using that without really understanding where it fits into our, you know, our SDLC or into our workflow. Is that what you're hitting on? That we give them the context, give them the reason behind it?
Yeah, it's the fact that half of the audience are coming from that Bay Area mindset of already knowing how products are built, and this is a tool to build them better. But the rest of the audience don't even know how to build products, but they know they have to build something, and what they're doing at the moment isn't working, so they want to be able to do it faster. So, you know, the conversation I have most frequently is, we need a CI/CD well, why? In what context? You know, how are you going to apply it? What advantages is it going to give you? And when you dig in, you find that they've got a waterfall business process for a strategic plan that's 5 years long. And the CICD isn't actually going to give them any advantage at all unless they first tackle their whole strategic approach to how they're structuring their product development. So I think
Absolutely,
we
yeah.
make sure we include some of that in this middle storytelling, so that we don't end up being another misleading source, offering a silver bullet of going faster without saying under what context will you go faster, and when perhaps won't you.
Absolutely, and that I think you're right. I think we do have people who are coming in and they've heard about DORA or they've heard about these 4 key metrics. But I think if you step back further than that and you say to people, document like that whole value stream mapping thing. So like, what is your process? Like, do you have it even written down? And do you even know what all the players are? And evaluate where your bottlenecks are there. And it might be something as simple as step 1 is we have to figure out what our processes are and where things are breaking, because we can't even get to identifying some of these questions that are in DORA because we don't even know what those answers are. And yeah, sometimes people are coming in and they're driven not by speed but by cost, right? So then the focus might be something like, well, you can save cost by through virtualization, and then maybe from virtualization and bare metal, you go from bare metal, you virtualize, and then you maybe move to the cloud later. But it's figuring out where you are now and helping people to figure out the tools they can use to do that, so then they can understand what their priorities are, so that they aren't just using CI/CD as this buzzword, or like finding some checklist that tells them, you do these 10 things and you have your silver bullet. I completely agree with you.
That's kind of focusing on the when. If you're talking about the what, the why, how, who, and when, this is more focusing on when to use it as well, because it doesn't necessarily fit for everybody, right?
Yeah. So that's a good point to make. Okay. So we spent some time talking about that. The other thing to talk about is the importance of team culture. And I don't know how much we want to get into this, but the fact is that whenever you're working across teams, implementing anything across teams requires having a supportive culture that is going to allow for change. And I don't know necessarily that we need to get into detail about actionable things for people to do, but even just having something to call out if you don't have a culture that will allow you to have good communication between teams, for example, then transforming the way you work and breaking some of these bottlenecks is just not going to happen. And then go see some resources on how to do that. So that was the other kind of gap that we had identified.
Yeah, and I think you could probably argue that that's actually the most important part, because if you haven't got the culture piece right, you won't be able to deliver any of the other components in a way that sticks.
Yeah, and people tend to jump straight to the tools because they look like shiny silver bullets, and the fact is, you can't do it unless you have this in place. So
And tools is easier than people, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, this is, I think,
I need that t-shirt.
Yeah.
I think this is, we talked about this many months ago in the earlier days of this discussion about the whole concept of what are the common anti-patterns in this approach, right? And lack of executive buy-in, lack of culture investment are probably the biggest areas.
I think fear of failure is a huge one for developers coming in, because no matter what level you are, if you want to implement something and you're trying to battle against what the current norm is in the organization, there's obviously still at least some culture there that are used to using the current process, maybe don't want to change, and would only relish not having to learn new stuff. There's always that side. So there is a fear of failure no matter what level you are, and no matter how much pull you have, so to speak, in your current team, you are going to have that certain amount of fear there, and making sure that you can break down that barrier is the key thing for me.
Yeah, okay. Engineers hate change. We know this. And I think that's where in that particular case, I think having the tying it back to the what Terry was saying around context, but even more granularly, which is, what are the incremental success milestones or success metrics that you can be aligning against in order to show value in the course of the process, or to course correct during the process. I think both of those things, to speak to what you were saying, Anthony, is that, how to kind of buck yourself along, right? Like, no, I got these three things done. We're making progress here, and then I can tell other people about them and build that momentum, right? And a lot of times when I talk about organizational transformation along these lines, it is that the theme of momentum. There are no switches, right?
Yeah, and you could almost describe this as being on a continuum where at one end you've got failure is not an option, and the other end you've got failure is compulsory. And
Yeah.
what we're talking about
Westrom.
is
Yes.
we're really talking about a methodology that gets its effectiveness from acknowledging that the best way to learn is to fail all the time, but do it at very small scale and very, very quickly.
Yes.
So the whole of this methodology is based on making safe spaces to fail in, so that you can learn what you actually need in order to succeed.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And just one thing I was going to add, just on the list, I guess because of the resources, like for me, team topologies is a slightly different thing. Like, again, the topology, there could be an assessment of how your teams are structured and what that looks like. But that's also distinct from culture. So maybe we want something like the Westrom surveys, the 5 or 6 questions you ask to evaluate the culture.
Okay. Yeah, this was very much throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks. So
Yeah, no, I love it.
Yeah,
It's great.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that is also quite significant, because we have to keep in mind, from our perspective, that a big chunk of the audience will not understand that there are alternative ways of structuring teams and alternative roles that they've never encountered before. So, most people who are coming to this will never have met a product manager and won't understand what a product manager is responsible for and what they add to this type of methodology. So, you'll find that many people will be thinking from a project perspective, and will be thinking about managers and doers and people allocating work and people delivering work. And there will be zero focus on product and and aligning and discovering and measuring against what the customer wants. So yeah, I think it's important that we do try and highlight some of those alternative ways of seeing the world to show how that fits into making the methodologies work.
So this was mostly just collection for our purposes. If we do, this is for the sort of community contributed side. Some examples of resources that are things that have come out of Google. So things that we might, for example, highlight in a more Google specific implementation. Some of them are resources that are sort of known in the industry, but that's really all this slide is. And then some external resources that are related to like Dora and some other stuff. This again was more, okay, stuff that we might need to keep in mind when looking at things. So for example, I found that you had your CD Foundation guidelines around things like terminology, and you have a code of conduct already. So for example, if we have a contributor guide, we want to make sure we reference the code of conduct. So this, again, is not necessarily content we would put on the site, but stuff that would be important to look at and reference when putting the material together. And Jen,
another piece that we probably want to just make a note on is, we want to be explicit about supply chain, so software supply chain, because again, it's another one of those things that we take for granted, but the audience won't necessarily be thinking in those terms. So again, we should provide some pointers and an overview and just set some context to help people to understand how that fits into the overarching problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't talk too much about that because there was that security section in the draft we have going, but particularly this year, software supply chain security has definitely been front of mind for a lot of people. So yeah, that's definitely in scope. Jen, do you want to talk about this, or do you want me to talk about it?
No, sure, I can talk about it. So what we were thinking is that the next steps, probably the first most important thing, and I think we've done some of this even in this meeting, is to really flesh out those user journeys so that we know exactly what we're doing, exactly what the mindset is of the user who's coming to the site. And Terry, I feel like you have a ton of background there. Everything you've been saying about what they know and what you expect them to know, I think we need to capture somewhere. And so I'm not exactly sure what the best way would be for us to proceed collaboratively in this way, but I think if we go back to that slide, I think it's slide 5, Nicola, I'm sorry, I'm not sure. I can't remember. It's the big table. Yeah, right there. Oop.
Oh.
So I think if we could maybe as a team or individually and bring them back and merge them, if we could really flesh this out so that we have the level of detail that Terry was getting to in describing kind of where the customer mindset is, I think that would be a great next step, because then we could really get into the assigning the content types and where they should be for each stage of the customer journey. Does that make sense to folks?
Yeah, and I think for me, this always reminds me of the parable of the 4 blind men and the elephant.
Oh yeah, so true. Yeah, it's going to be different for everyone. So what we want to do is, if we get close to the 80% and hope that the 20% can figure out the rest. Yeah. But there's just a lot that you said, Terry, that I think could flow right in here and really help.
Yeah, well, feel free to reach out to me if you want some of my time, and we can go through that.
Okay, great.
Yeah, no, I think this is really, really good, and thanks so much for putting it together. One thought I'm having is, like, I guess you're reminding me, like, that Google already has a lot of these really useful sites and almost some of this information in a different format. So I guess I'm trying to think through what is the value add. We're trying to kind of pull together some different things, and I think for me, we have to, and you touched on it at the beginning, how do people share their stories? How do we have the community come through and contribute what they're doing or where they're at? And maybe something to do with open source projects, because otherwise I don't want to be just kind of redoing what Google's already been through in just a slightly different format with a different site. So yeah, just trying to think through what's going to
Yeah.
make this key.
Yeah, well, and Tracy, you and I were talking about how we want to. There's like the two phases of these ideas. One is sort of the most neutral concepts, terms, patterns, right? And then there's the execution of those, and I think that's what you were touching on as well just now. It's like we've got, Google's done a bunch of investigations of this, as have many others, right? How can we bring in what would we call it, like linked content? Like, here's a set of concepts that are just defined in a neutral setting. Here's how it looks like if you use Google stuff. Here's how it looks if you use Spinnaker. Here's how it looks if you use Screwdriver, right? And so one of the things that I think would be really interesting to do is to see if we can reach out to those projects, like who does that type of are there partners that could speak to some of that content in those ecosystems? And
Yeah,
Anthony's and I forgot. Oh gosh, I'm blocking another name. Done all that test documentation. I think that's a whole. Totally spacing on the other guy's name. Sorry.
No worries.
I think there's a lot of opportunity to kind of flesh out that whole category.
This looks really messy, but when we had started sort of brainstorming on that first slide, we had divided, there was that sort of division between the community stuff and the coming in and learning and wanting to improve your company. So we had sort of started out with a Jamboard and kind of tossed ideas around. And the thought was, and again, this is not set in stone, this is throwing it at the wall and see what sticks, is that someone could come in, and if their primary focus is learning, then they would come in. They may not be familiar with continuous delivery. Maybe they learn about that and they're like, okay, well, where do I start next? So they use an assessment tool to learn about it. And this is all sort of the vendor agnostic stuff. So the assessment tools might be Dora, might be value stream mapping. For security, it might be something like Salsa and looking at a security kind of maturity framework. And then we would get into our best practice stuff here. And then on the right side, we have, okay, so I have implemented some stuff and I want to share some of my lessons learned. So we can share some of the Google things here. We can link between the vendor agnostic stuff possibly and just say, hey, if you want to see an implementation of MLOps, you can look over here. But we would kind of have these divisions so that people who are coming in to look about, hey, okay, so I know I want to implement something in the MLOps space and I want to see an example of someone who's done it. They know they can look over here. But if it's more along the lines of, I'm just starting this journey and I want to know what I need to address, then they're more on this left side.
No, the one thing that concerns me a little bit in this area is how we go about managing the sort of democratic fallacy problem, in that, which user stories are we actually going to share and propagate? Which ones are genuinely valid examples versus which are stories about things that people have done that aren't actually DevOps but have been done under a DevOps banner. So we will need to be mindful of making sure that we're selecting the best of those stories and the most illustrative of the best practices.
Yeah, my approach to that would be almost to let everybody contribute their story, but maybe have a way to
upvote,
certify, for the want of a better word, where we almost like a peer review. And there's some that can be marked as, okay, this has been reviewed, we've had a discussion, or we've had an open session where people can almost like defend it or talk through it. And then once that's done, it's got a badge or something that helps it stand out.
Yeah, I certainly think we're in an interesting situation at the moment where everyone you talk to has a world-class DevOps process, but the majority are also struggling to see any value from having implemented it. So, if we're going to help people, we're actually going to have to really help them to differentiate between what works and what doesn't, and what the context was that made that successful.
Are you thinking that you'll have multiple content moderators, or is it kind of going to be this group taking a look at what gets submitted? Or have you had a chance even to think about how that's going to work?
Like, I think with typical open source models, there's a core group of kind of maintainers or folks, and I would expect best practices we can build out and get more folks involved and have a core team.
Yeah, because I mean, that feels like it's another sort of user goal for the site, right? Is assess and moderate the contributor content. So yeah, so we'll maybe stick a little piece to that effect in there, just so that it's in the back of our minds.
Yeah, I expect, like any open source project, there needs to be some governance and some guidelines.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
I'm hoping we can make it really simple. Like, use this template, file the PR in this way.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sure it will be harder than that, but
yes,
that's my fantasy.
No silver bullets, right? Everything's
Yeah.
I mean, I think that the challenge will be probably in the MLOps space, because the best practice in that area is not well understood, and a lot of the commercial products that currently exist are not what you would consider to be best practice. So there will be a conflict between the commercial interests of people wanting to promote their products versus what actually is the best way of working in those areas. So that's something we're going to encounter for sure.
So I don't know if some amount of that could be tempered with having, transparent criteria around what we vet in order to have a badge for being featured.
Right.
So that it doesn't feel like it's this arbitrary process where something goes in and we say, yes, you're allowed to be featured, but there's no transparency around how you got there. And I think we had some kind of criteria that was published.
Yeah.
Then we'd have some rationale for that.
Yeah. Or we could go the opposite way and have a market-driven approach where we allow people to post and then we track their survival rate for the next 5 years and score them.
Well, I mean, that could also be community-driven, sort of like Stack Overflow style, where people could upvote solutions that work for them.
That would be the lowest maintenance, probably.
Yeah.
But 5 years is forever, first of all.
Yes.
The whole point of this is to try and help people avoid shit shows, not become part of a social experiment.
We just said it's okay to fail, Tara. Come on.
I'm okay failing if it's not in the service of, marketing driven solutions. Yeah. So, but that will be a good problem to have, actually, if we're to the point where we're having to fight off. Wait, what the hell is this? This is particularly true, I think. You think about a lot of the companies that sell sort of bundled developer tech stacks. It'll be interesting to see, if those start to come into this vein, what that looks like. But I do think having some kind of rubric, like, okay, you must line up in the following ways in order to be considered, could be helpful. Phew. All right, so next steps.
So yeah, I think next steps are to really fill in that user journey, and maybe the way to start even is to come up with a persona. I don't know if you folks are familiar with working with personas, but yeah. It sounds like we kind of have one, but we haven't actually shared it or written it down.
I think we have
We have
two.
we have a
which is the
couple,
problem.
We have multi, yeah, multi.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
Or-
if you folks wouldn't mind just writing those down, then we can sketch out a little more, in a little more detail what their actual journey is. Does that sound like a good thing to do? Good use of time?
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Okay. I think that would be very helpful because it definitely sounds like there are people coming from a variety of different places, and yeah, we want to try to catch them all and filter them in the right direction. So can you just create a shared doc, or is there a way we can?
I want to, okay, now I need to bring it up. I want to say that we talked about this a little bit in the mega doc, but maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's probably the place to start, is just to pull that stuff out and
Yeah.
see if it's complete.
Tracy, you had a piece of persona work from one of the other work streams, didn't
Yeah,
you?
let me just bring that up, and then I'll give my quick assessment of. Just give me a minute.
Oh crap! I forgot to bring up the notes. Are you taking notes, Tracy?
Not in a useful way.
All right. Hey, okay.
If
Sorry.
you want me to write stuff down.
No. I just, if you were doing it, great. Otherwise, I realized I forgot to bring up the HackMD. I will do that now.
Okay, so we did have, let me see if I can do the share screen. In other parts of CDF, we had kind of these discussions around stakeholder personas. Since then, I think we have discussed them with this group, and in essence, all the different types pretty much boil down to
It's okay.
the C-suite one and the developer-focused one, with lots of variants on each one. So the application developer, which is kind of your traditional developer. Then there's the second one is like your ops person or DevOps person or cloud engineer, but the person focused more on kind of the delivery and operation side. And then delivery director and technology executive, just two different levels of leadership. So delivery director more closer to the teams, and then technology executives is C-suite. And then there was a bit of a random one, which was more from our community on the advocate, but I think you've kind of covered that in your, these are the people who go out and spread the word. So it's just a
Right.
kind of different area. And I think, where does PM go? Because I know, Terry, we had the PMs, I think they loosely go in here. Yeah, which is
Delivery.
So yeah, I think this was where we kind of identified that the product management role was missing from this discussion originally, and was probably indicative of the nature of the way that teams were working when we got this from our collaborators. So I think that's one where there's broadly, this is going to be, I suppose, three personas really, in that there's the purely commercial perspective, which is your C-suite roles. Then there's the purely engineering perspective, which is I have to build this thing. But then there's the bit in the middle, which is I have to work out what this thing is and how we get value from it in order to get this team to do something that makes money for this team. And really, I suppose that's the product manager role. So I think there are probably three broad perspectives on this. One about what is it and what value am I going to drive from it at a commercial level. One which is what is it and how is it going to improve my experience of delivering this? And then the one which is, how does this aid me in effectively delivering things that I don't yet know what they are, and how can I use that to discover them?
That's a great summary.
I like that a lot.
What is the value? How will it help my experience? How will it help me be effective at optimization in ways I don't know about yet? Those are
Yeah,
great.
because again, yeah, it's about linking back to the fact that these practices are primarily about efficiently discovering things you don't know,
Mm-hmm.
rather than efficiently delivering things that you already know about. Because if we had perfect knowledge, waterfall would be more efficient.
Right. Great.
And then I think once you divide the audience into those three, it almost feels like at CDF, we just want to target that middle bucket, the people balancing both concerns, who are effectively change agents and have to kind of deal with all those unknowns.
Right, but I think that's where all of the work that's been done, for example, on the testing stuff, is going to become critical, because that becomes one of the #1 questions around execution when you're developing this stuff, which is, if you don't have a good automation story, where do you even start? What does it look like? How do you do that? So and that's also one of the toughest areas, because it's often the most vendor driven. So I think that's going to be where the meatiest, well, apologies to the vegetarians, I'll come up with a better analogy, but the meatiest part of the user content, or the workflow stuff, I think will be in there. So I'm very excited about that.
Great.
But I think this is going to turn out to be equally important for each of these three categories, because when you look at this in context, the reason why you would want to do it in the first place needs to be driven from the commercial perspective, and they are the only people who can actually make this succeed, because they have to restructure the whole of the organization to facilitate this way of working.
Mm-hmm.
So at some point, they have to own and drive this change process for everybody. So if they're not driving the process in the first place, somebody's going to have to sell it to them to the point at which they take on responsibility for driving it. Now, that in our experience tends to be that someone from the engineering side has discovered the methodology and is trying to implement it. And unless they successfully sell it at a C-suite level, they won't be able to implement it, because they'll get so far and then they'll get blocked by corporate antibodies. And then the middle role, which is the practical one, is the one where, you guys have decided you're doing this weird thing, and now it's fallen to me to actually implement it. What the hell is it I'm supposed to be doing? So, each of these viewpoints is equally as important in getting the success of this process. And we're going to need to explain not just how to do it from each perspective, but how to understand the other two perspectives from the third, so that everyone who's involved can see not just their bit, but also the important parts of the other two personas.
Yeah, I think very often people don't really understand the C-suite, for example, perspective at all, and so they don't necessarily even know what's going to be compelling to those folks. So, yeah.
Unless it's the CFO, make it cheap.
Right. Yeah. So I guess what are our next steps here? Anybody?
So if that's good enough on personas,
I think, yeah.
we start mapping out those stories, and I'd be all for throwing up prototypes as well.
Great.
Just start putting some concrete stuff down and see how it looks, and just iterate.
Okay.
We
So
Yeah, go ahead.
Did we want to start investigation of any kind of tools? Were there preferences or requirements around that kind of stuff in terms of where we're publishing, what tool we use to publish, and anything like that?
No specific. Remind me, Doxy is backed by ASCII or Markdown? ASCII Docs?
It is Markdown, as far as I know. It was actually started by one of the folks in the tech writing org here at Google. So there are a number of projects like Kubernetes that use it. I believe Tecton also uses Doxy.
Yeah, Jenkins does as well.
Yeah, so one of the benefits is we have some precedent and we have people internally who can help us with that.
Yeah.
But we're not certainly married to implementing that. But knowing that means that we can start digging into and, maybe recruiting people to help us set things up and so on.
Yeah, I think that's fine. Like, I think we had started some work on GitHub pages. I don't think there's a huge difference. And I think it's more important we get started
It's all
with
Markdown
something.
in the end.
Great.
Yeah.
I
And
think
would love-
the overarching question there is, can we use this tool to, in a continuous deployment and continuous delivery manner? And if we can, then that sounds like a good fit.
Pretty sure
Yeah.
that the tecton.dev is still just a repo. And I'm guessing it's
I'm pretty
similar
sure.
for Kubernetes as well. And then the other thing, and I guess the TOC would be the best place to do this. I don't know, Tracy, let me know what you think as far as starting to spread the word. Don't go to the TOC. I was just as far as like starting to spread the word for
Spreading
trying
the
to
word.
recruit other content contributors.
Yes.
from the other
Yeah,
projects.
I wouldn't limit it to the TOC, but I think we can hit.
Well, for the next phase, right? I think it
think-
would be awesome. Like I'm proud that Google is stepping up, but I would love if we could get Armory and CloudBees and some of the other primary project sponsors involved if possible.
Yeah, I think it's for that. It always comes down to what is the ask, and the more clear the ask, the better. I think there's only a few people who can deal with the lack of clarity, or the discussions we've been having up to now, where we're kind of bouncing all over the place. But once things start to solidify into, here's some sections, here's where we need contributions, I think that it becomes a lot easier to get people to look at it and contribute.
Okay.
Great.
I'm
So
happy to just make those connections and start to pull people in at the board level and the TOC level and the other working groups.
Yeah, the only reason I was thinking sooner rather than later, just because I want to, maybe I'm being overly sensitive on the optics of it. I just want to make sure that people don't, the other projects don't feel like we're muscling in.
Okay, I'll have someone here from AWS next week. That'll be good.
And a Microsoft, don't forget.
yeah, Azure.
That's a step too far. Okay.
Boom. Oh, that means Microsoft didn't sponsor, did they?
Means they don't return my calls, that's all.
Yeah. All right. Screw Azure.
Love for them to join, of course, but
Yes.
there we go. Cool. Thank you so much. Just conscious of time, but that was really great. And yeah, I'm very excited about moving this forward.
So
So
maybe
do we
for
want
to go ahead, Tara.
I was just going to say two quick questions. One, do we want to create a new repo then for the Doxy stuff, or can we repurpose whatever we had started?
Just create a new repo, I'd say.
Okay.
And let me know what you need. I can spin that up.
Okay. And then really quick, just for the purposes of the notes, is it possible, Jan or Nicola, for you to share your deck as world viewable? I
Sure.
don't think we need to let them touch it.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And if you're open to it, like if you're happy for me to start even sharing that deck as we go, I can go around starting to recruit people and pull them into the group, or get people who have been previously involved to come back.
Sure.
Perfect.
I don't actually know how to share this as world viewable.
Yeah, I know sometimes with internal things we're locked down pretty hard, so I'm not sure.
Okay.
Here, if you want, I mean, this, if you want, I can make a copy of it and put it on my personal account.
Okay,
And
I'd also
we just make sure that we take off any Google Confidential, because they're obviously saying Google Confidential in there. I mean, if you don't mind doing it, that's fine. If you'd rather I do it in case somebody gets a stick up their ass, I'm happy to do it. But it shouldn't
Either
be a
way,
problem.
yeah,
could
I
do-
will take a pass and make sure it's pruned of any internal things, and I can just ping in chat and let you both
Yeah.
know.
Or you know what? The other thing you could do is save it out as a PDF, and then we could just upload it, and it could just be a blob. Thanks, Jan. So I can follow up with you, Nicola, on it.
Sure.
Okay, cool. Well, late for a meeting. All right. Thank you, everyone.
bye. Talk soon.
Thanks. Good work.
Bye.
Thanks. Take care.